Well, hello everybody and welcome back to this week's episode of the My Love of Golf podcast. It's Roscoe here, your host, and thank you as always for tuning in. Thank you for your likes, comments, feedback, shares, subscribes. Everything that you do to help keep this podcast in the ears of as many people as possible is always greatly appreciated. This week's episode is with the great man, Andy Maher. Andy Maher doesn't need too much introduction for those of us here in Australia, but for those of us around the world, he is one of Australia's great sports broadcasters and journalists. Lucky enough to be able to call Andy a golfing buddy, and this week we just catch up, and basically it's just the two of us having a chat about our love of golf, our love of sport, a little bit of football, and all of the things that have just popped up into our sphere in the week that we recorded this, which was a couple of weeks ago now. Really appreciate having Andy on. As I said, he's one of Australia's greats and a very charismatic man, and I always enjoy a round of golf with Andy Maher, and I hope you enjoy this podcast and listening to Andy and I catching up, chatting about golf, our love of golf, as he rightly points out. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Andy Maher, welcome to the My Love of Golf podcast. How are you, sir? It's great to see you.
Our Love of Golf podcast, Roscoe.
That is very correct. And you know, the intention of the My Love of Golf podcast was not about my love of golf, as you rightly point out. It is our love of golf, and you know that's how our journey brings us sitting here tonight. Me and Matt Eliza, you up there in the city, because we love golf and we've played a bit of golf together. And you know, after 100 or so episodes, I thought, well, Andy would be interested in having a chat to me, I'm sure. So, and here we are. And thank you very much.
You're clearly running out of potential guests. So, but it's a joy to be here. I always feel a bit when I end up talking to people like you and others who are far more golf literate than I am. I do occasionally feel like I'm a bit out of my depth when but I love it's one of those. It's a game that it doesn't matter how intricate your knowledge is. If you love it, it's just great fun talking about it. So, and
absolutely hit the nail on the head. And I recently said to the listeners that you know, the six of them that do choose to listen every couple of weeks, I did say, if anyone's interested and has a story, and I don't care what level of story, you know, please come and share it with me. And I chatted to a fellow in Ireland last night, and wow. He said, I was listening to your podcast, walking along the beach, wind in my ears, looking up to Portmarnock Golf Course, because he lives in Portmarnock and Portmarnock Beach. He said, you know what, I'm going to do that. And we chatted for about 2 hours last night. And for me, that was quite a special moment, just to think that someone in Portmarnock, Ireland, is listening and wanted to take the time to have a chat to me about their love of golf and how they came to Australia. And so it was great. But
well, it's a great connector. The game's an unbelievable connector. And it's, you know, it's the reason that it is because, my simple theory is that it doesn't matter. Like, you're a much better player than me, but how you play hopefully doesn't get impacted by the way I play when you and I play together. It's not like a game of tennis where it is significant how you play and how, therefore, probably how much you enjoy playing on that particular day is largely dependent on the player at the other end of the court.
Yeah.
It's a great thing about golf. No one should ever be worried about how good they are compared to the people they're playing with, because it really doesn't matter.
Now, I'm an okay golfer. You know, certainly not the best golfer getting around, but I do get a lot of people say to me, and I quickly try and extinguish, you know, the discussion. Oh, I can't play with you because, you know, you're better than me and I don't want to hold you up. And I said, hey, that's so not what it's all about. And, oh, really? You'd be happy to play with someone? Let's just go and do it. And and that's one of the great things. Andy, I started to write a list of all the things that you've been involved in your media career, and I ran out of digital paper on this little digital notebook that I got. It's extensive and it's impressive, and you know, you're a humble guy because I know you pretty well now, and you just go, no, I'm just a guy telling the stories about sport. But the back catalogue of the work that you've done is unbelievable. When you think about the sports that you've been involved in, and I didn't even know you'd covered, I couldn't remember you'd covered the motorbikes. Now, I used to be in the motorbike industry, but you've covered the motorbikes.
Very briefly. Motorsport's not that is as far from my strong suit as it gets. And I was immediately exposed to be out of my depth when that was the case. But I've just been really lucky to be in the right place often enough at the right time. And I think the one thing that's held me in reasonable stead is an interest. Like I've got a genuine interest in the stuff that, we end up talking about. But professionally, I've never overreached. I've always known what my role is, what's required of me, and just how to be a functioning member of a team. And, whether you're doing radio, newspaper's a bit different. It's probably a bit more solo. But when you're involved in radio or TV, you are absolutely part of a team. And you can't be an on-course, reporter covering a golf tournament if the audio bloke is no good. And if you can't get a camera to shoot the shot you want, you can't be no good. You can't be good at what you do. And so you lean on all of the other people who are completely dependent on. And I think people have always been okay working with me, and that's seen me stay employed, which in the caper that I work in, and it's easier said than done, so.
Now, you've been very kind to me in just offering some encouragement to my young fella who who we've spoken to as,
and he's doing all the right things.
And, you started your career at Marcelin. You're a big Marcelin guy, and I believe commentating the footy on the side of the ground. Is that right for Marcelin?
Yep. I got dropped from the 1984 grand final. I played in the prelim and got dropped in the granny, and we're playing Caulfield Grammarians in B grade. So we'd already won the prelim, so already back up to A grade, and I got dropped for the granny. And so at Elstonwick Park, people may know or may not know it, but there's a tin roof that sits above the old kind of function centre there, and we set up a camera on the roof of the grandstand, or the roof of that building. And I sat up there with a bloke called Spear Walsh, who rolled the camera, and he plugged a tiny little microphone into his camera. And I sat there, and alongside Spear, we called a one-camera coverage of the grand final. We lost it in the end, but it didn't matter. We've sort of done the job. And that was, I think, probably the first game of footy that I ever called.
And did you think that's what you wanted to do, or before then, or did you know, or what was it like?
I always wanted to be, once I realised I was no good at playing, I always knew I wanted to be a journo. So for the first 10 years of my life, I was a print journo. And then through an absolute stroke of good fortune, through a relationship with somebody who I'd developed as a print journo, an opportunity arose in TV. The earliest stages of pay TV in Australia, Optus Vision, people won't even remember it. We were only around for a couple of years. It sort of morphed through a few things, eventually became a thing called C7, and that was the start of it. So it's sort of how it went. After about 10 years of writing for a living, I got the opportunity to start writing for TV and producing. And that's kind of was the first toe in the water there.
How did you go when they said, right, you're going to be in front of the camera now?
So the first thing that happened, I was producing a show called One-on-One, really brilliantly titled program. One person sat there talking to another one-on-one. Incredibly complex title we sort of workshopped to come up with. And I was producing that show. And one particular afternoon, we had a guy called Des Tuddenham, legend of the Collingwood Essendon Footy Club, legend of the game. Des Tuddenham had been booked to come in and do a show, and we're all there, makeup and records. There were all the people in the record area. Everyone's there. But the bloke who was supposed to do the interview had got his dates wrong, and he was in Sydney. So Tuddy had arrived, and I rang my boss, Dave Barham, and I said, Dave, we've got a bit of a problem here. We've just found out that Mike can't make it. He's in Sydney. We're ready to go. Des is here. Can you ring someone to get him to come over quickly and do the interview? And he said, no, too late for that. You do it. It was a 30-minute one-on-one interview show, pre-recorded. It wasn't live. I said, no, I can't. And he goes, you can do it. You do it. Just quickly go and put a collar and tie on, get a jacket and sit down and just do the interview. It's costing us too much money to stuff around now. So I sat down with somebody else's shirt, tie and jacket, and pants. None of them fit me properly. And I interviewed Des Tuddenham for about 45 minutes, which we cut down to about 25 minutes. And it went okay. And that was the end of the bloke up in Sydney. And Dave said, we don't need him anymore. You can keep doing this show. So I had my own show in no time, which was ridiculous.
And when you look back at the vision of that first ever interview, what do you think?
I can't believe how much hair I had.
Oh, yeah.
Which you and I.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it was such an out of body experience. The whole. I don't really have a physical memory of doing this, like sitting there and doing the show. It was just I remember when I said to everybody, look, Dave said I got to do it. They went, well, hang on, what? And these are, experienced producers and, directors and audio people and, no, you got to do it. I'm going to do it. And I went, okay, right. This is going to be a debacle. And so I was feeling all sorts of different layers of pressure going to do that, but it went okay. And
so the moral is you just got to get in and have a crack.
Just have a go. Yeah. And the other thing is, I'd prepared, as if I'd prepared all the questions and I'd done, I'd prepared for the interview. And I knew Des Tuddenham, as a kid growing up, I'd watched Tuddy, I'd watched his career. So I had a back catalogue of kind of knowledge that allowed me to fudge my way through.
You mentioned prepare there. And the thing that amazes me, when I think about you and the work that you do and, then when I got to know you, it amazed me even more because I got to hear some of the stories and hear you talk about this variety of sports that you cover. It's how you prepare. Like every time I turn the Twitter on, you've got a comment about every different sport that's happening. You've got all of the other avenues that you're involved in. How do you prepare? You've got this savant-like knowledge across such a broad breadth of sport. I don't, but thanks for saying that. I watch stuff. I've always been from a very young age, whatever, we had available to us, and it was far different back in the 70s when I was growing up, what we could access on television compared to now. God, if I was a 10-year-old kid now with being the 10-year-old kid that I was back then, you'd never get me out of the house. I'd just be consumed by the amount of content coming into us. My head wouldn't know how to kind of cope with it all. So I just watched stuff, I was just kind of watching everything, We had the match of the day coming in once a week, so Liverpool were flying, back in the mid-70s. So that's every 2 out of every 3 games we had on the ABC was a Liverpool match. We got the live games coming through from Europe. I remember the European Cup games were, being through on this sort of scratchy, sepia sort of tone coverage and, the Dalglish kind of soonest here. So we just absorbed that. And I just kind of watched whatever I could watch, and a bit of it embedded and enough of it stayed there to just allow me to kind of pretend to sound like I know what I'm talking about, We mentioned Dalglish and Souness, and you know that I'm a proud product of
course, mate.
Scottish parents, and Scottish football was part of my upbringing. I'm not a Liverpool fan, as you know. I'm an Arsenal fan at the moment, and since we lost it on Foxtel, I'm probably not that deeply engaged in it as I should be and as I'd like to be, and I don't have the time. But what's happening with Liverpool?
I think what I think last year, they've lost their centre back. He's a pretty good player, but I think last year's effort was so big. Was such a huge effort that so much emotional energy, this is my theory, so much emotional energy was poured into it. And it was such an unusual year, with the COVID and no one there, and that I think it's just taken a toll. I mean, Man City are playing pretty well. Like they're clearly, a bit too good at the moment. But I think the tank's empty and they can't find, so I think they'll bounce back. They're pretty talented, but they just got to hang on to a spot in the top 4 now, still Champions League active. So, they've got some big things to play for.
That Souness Dalglish era was pretty special. That was one of the things that I credit getting me interested in soccer, and hearing my dad talk about these guys that were from Scotland playing in England, and just watching them, and of course Craig Johnson, who was from Newcastle up there in the Hunter Valley, It was a great time. I remember more about Liverpool actually than I do about Arsenal.
Well, I'm not surprised. And it was that time on tally and another Scotsman, Sean Connery, who had a massive bearing. I grew up in a golf family, but who had a massive bearing on my interest in golf, because we got at about the same time we were getting pro celebrity golf coming in, Ronnie Corbett and the others, and Connery was a standard feature on that. And anybody who can remember the show remembers how it was shot and edited and packaged up. Just made the game look like a game that had to be played.
I can remember that. My dad obviously watched that. What was it called again? What was that?
BBC's Pro Celebrity Golf, I think, yeah.
So I can remember Ronnie Corbett and Sean Connery playing golf with, they'd play all over the place, but in St Andrews and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
they sort of try and do it now, don't they? With the stuff they're doing with Phil and the football guys. But I reckon we miss that. What do you reckon?
They're not as charming.
Yeah,
people do these guys. Mickelson's not a. I don't think he's a charming guy. He's not my cup of tea. But they're just the golf pros back in those days were just a different type. They're a bit more worldly. They hadn't grown up. They're not institutionalised by the game. There aren't many interesting, well, I shouldn't say that. Of the top flight players on the planet, there aren't too many of them that when they speak, you stop everything and listen to what they've got to say, because it is so interesting. There's so many interesting people in golf. But for Rory in the last maybe 12 to 24 months, Tiger wasn't that interesting to listen to. We loved watching him play. Greg never said anything that was interesting. Whatever Greg spoke, it was kind of pretty daft. Feldo was probably as interesting as anybody, but he was a, bag of neuroses when he was a pro. I mean, he's great now, I reckon. Again, probably not everyone's cup of tea, but I don't know. There's not too many of the absolute frontliners had the worldliness that maybe a couple of those others did back in the day. That's my vague memory of what they were like.
You mentioned there, and I'll sort of sidetrack for a sec. Faldo not being everyone's cup of tea as a commentator. He was a wonderful player, and as you say, he had his issues there for a while, and I can remember those. But as a commentator, he's not everyone's cup of tea. Do you ever get any of that? Do you have do you have to deal with that sort of stuff? How do you deal with the bombarding of people just having a swipe at you and all of that sort of stuff?
No, all the time. And it's you get it on social media is the great platform for abuse. It's a great sort of abuser. But people are talking about the cancel culture in the last 12 months, sort of politically. Well, thank God Twitter's allowed us to exercise a cancel culture for. Ever since its inception with, muting and blocking. So the minute you're always happy to take on, if you say something and people disagree with you, then fantastic. Let's have a chat and let me know what your view is, and maybe you can bring me over to yours, and I'll admit that mine was flawed. But the minute you just get a blatant, flat out, personal abuse, and it's often not even stuff that gets directed at me. I'm old enough now not to worry about that. But when I see it directed at other people, particularly on people I'm close to, that's the stuff that worries me. And, some people are more capable of coping with that than others. I think Nick's probably got a pretty thick hide by now.
I reckon he has. When you watch golf now, and you consider where it is as a entertainment product, and I guess that's what we have, and that's what it is. What do you think? If you had to, sit up there in the director's booth and tweak the knobs, what would you be doing?
I would demand that I wouldn't worry about what the PGA Tour says. I would say we're paying the checks. So if you want our money, let us do an unfettered broadcast. And by that I mean, if we see something that is controversial, not to our liking, perhaps brings the game into disrepute because of the behaviour of an individual playing the game, we will call it out. I want my commentators to be honest, and I want them to tell me what we're seeing. And we got I think we finally got it with the most recent Patrick Reed, incident. I think we saw it. I think finally we got we had a cohort of commentators who maybe enough's enough with this bloke in particular, but they covered it properly. They didn't bury it like he tried to bury his golf ball. They actually called it out for what it was. And it was the most interesting American broadcast that I've seen for a day that I can maybe even ever remember, because they were calling it. They were calling it out.
Are you surprised at the way that the PGA Tour choose to handle issues like that, or do you no, you're not?
No. They're an organisation run by conservative, rich, powerful white men for whom brand management is important. Their own reputations are important, and they would prefer to sidestep any sort of controversy, to just keep the waters smooth. So that's a broad sweep, and that's a real generalisation. But no, they're as good as, in inverted commas or not, they are as good as any sporting organisation in the world at controlling the narrative.
Do you think, in a time when inclusivity is so important to everything in life, but golf in particular in this case, do you think they get in the way of that?
That's a really good question. Possibly. I think we saw something really. I think under the decade and a bit of Mike Wan's stewardship of the LPGA, I think we saw what can be done in terms of that. Before he arrived, some of the language around the Korean players who were starting to really take a foothold in the game was borderline. It was actually pretty racist. It was unacceptable, the stuff. Oh, they can't speak. Their language is no good. They shouldn't be allowed in. They're taking the spots of American. Some of the stuff, if you remember back, it was pretty unsavoury. And Mike Wan, to his credit, with his executive team, and others will know more about this than me. I'm very much. I've been watching this from a distance, but he was all no. We can't make these players feel unwelcome because English is not their first language. They are so good, and they are, as a region, they are going to produce so many world-class players that we have to have them on our tour. And they will elevate the games of everybody around them. And you look at the world of women's golf in particular, and we're starting to see it now in the men's game. The talent pool is so extraordinary. Imagine if we didn't encourage that. Imagine if we had an organisation that shunned. You go and play on your own tours. You can come and play in the majors if you qualify, but no, we're going to keep our American tour for a certain type, and you can go and play elsewhere. I think he's done a remarkable job, and they've shone a light, I think, the LPGA on what can be in that respect.
You enjoy your women's sport, you enjoy your women's golf, and you're a massive advocate for it. How good, when you invest the time in watching the girls play golf, and in this podcast, like interviews about their love of golf, and then I've got my mate Rocket. I think you had a bit of a Twitter exchange with Rocket today, and we're guilty of sometimes not giving the girls' game the fullest intent of covering. We don't cover it, it's not the right way to use it, but just chatting about it. I sometimes sit back and go, we just breeze by that, and I'm mad at myself, and I try and do better at it. But you're a massive advocate for it, and just back to the point is, how good is women's golf, and how enjoyable is it to watch?
Well, I remember there was I used to be a member of Commonwealth as a kid, and down here in Melbourne, and there was it might have been the Australian Women's Amateur was played. I won't even try and guess what the year was because I could be a decade off. But there was a rising star of Australian women's golf by the name of Nicole Lowian, and she could have
I played junior golf against Nicole up in the Hunter Valley. She would come up there, and she was the superstar at the time.
Yep. So you know her, and so she was. She's one of the headliners. of the tournament that year. And I thought I was probably playing reasonable. I was probably playing the best golf of my life. I was probably down to 11, around about that. I would have been early to mid-20s. And I thought, I'll go and watch her play. I'll go and watch the women play at my golf course. And I'd probably never, in fact, I don't think I'd ever watched women's golf before. And they were hitting the ball better than me, like, pure, and their control was something I could only dream of having. But my good shots were not far behind them. So I thought, hey, I can go, and I've been going and watching men's golf for years, and you get blown away by the power and the lines they take and, what they can do with a golf ball. But it's inconceivable that I could ever do what they can do. So in terms of what I could actually get out of the men's game, it was unachievable. But watching the women play, if I had have, really knuckled down and played more golf than I did, and as much golf as I should have, I would have worked on women's tempo. That's what I want to do. I want to swing the club like they do, and I want to learn how to control the ball the way because they were hitting it to the places that I could have hit it to on my golf course. So from an instructional, if for nothing else, from an instructional tool, they were so much more value to me than watching the men. It wasn't even a comparison.
Yeah, and for me, watching the girls play at Troon last year and at the British Women's Open, that was sensational. I quite often wonder what happened to Nicole Lewan. She was a genuine.
You get her on. You should get her on. Hunt her down and have a chat to her. She was fascinating.
Genuine women's superstar, but at the same time, you had the Wendy Doolans of the world who played in Europe many years. Tammy Durden, from South Australia. Who else? We had Dale Marshall, who grew up with, going to school with. She's a wonderful woman, young lady down here at Metropolitan, working down there and playing at Kingston Heath. Who else do we have? Obviously had Kari and Rachel Hetherington around that time. So there was so many great Australian women talent. I never really saw the girls play in a professional sense until I got the opportunity to go to the Vic Open, and you've done some work down there at the Vic Open, and it was just a great tournament for me to see the boys and the girls playing together.
How good is it?
You guys have talked about that on Inside the Ropes at length every time that it seems to and every time that it comes around. What does the world of golf have to do to embrace more of that? Because I just see it as an absolute zero-brainer to that should be a way that we should place, maybe not all, if it was all, I don't care, but at least some portion of the professional game year in, year out. I
agree. I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I think it takes the Vic Open's got a couple of things going for it, that people listening to you, and we don't need to explain why it works, but it's a convergence of all of the factors that make the Vic Open special that are required to be duplicated elsewhere. And they might have the golf courses, and they might have the title, and they might have the money, but maybe they don't have the volunteers that make it. Maybe they don't have the charm of a regional community throwing its complete community support behind it and using the tournament not only to market themselves, you know, as a region, but to have fun. Well, that's the great thing about the Vic Open. The locals down on the Bellarine Peninsula, they love that. Mm. They love being part of that. They love having that, and they make it. It's friendly. It's always, the weather's generally really good down there. It's the courses lend themselves to the tournament profile. There's a lot that makes that a pretty special event. Plus, there's a willingness. I mean, the Victorian state government, to its credit, I know they're copping a fair bit at the moment from certain quarters, but they have thrown an enormous amount of support behind that tournament. So it's another one of those add-ons that, you know, when you put all of the pieces into the pile, you end up with this magical event. So it's probably not as easy to replicate as you and I sit here and think it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, of course.
Because I agree with you. I thought it should be happening in more places.
And they've started to dip the toe in the water. I think in the UK they had a mixed professional event or series this year. Definitely in Scotland they had that. They
tried it in Scotland.
Yeah, they had the boys and the girls playing together.
Yep.
In terms of covering golf, you've done a fair bit of that.
Mm.
Do you? What's your number one sport to cover? If you say, I'm just got to do one for the rest of it, I'm going to do this. Is it golf? Is it footy? Is it where do you sit on that?
I would say golf.
Really?
If I could, yep. There was a moment in time when there was a Channel 10 had the rights to the Australian summer of golf, and it's pretty inextensive. Let's be honest. So there's not too much to it. But they had started up a digital channel, an HD digital channel called 1HD, still around now. And when 1HD was first constructed, everybody at 10 bid for it. News wanted it, entertainment wanted it, local product wanted it, sport wanted it, sport got it. Right? Internally, there's a massive Donnybrook to see who could get hold of 1HD, and sport got it. And I remember we had a meeting in South Yarra down at the Channel 10 offices. Grant Blackley was our general manager, and he came down and he had the 6 or 7 of us in a room, and he said, right, you might be wondering why I've called you here today. And he outlined this vision for 1HD. They were talking about One Asia being, this new wave of professional golf in the region. The Australian PGA suite was going to be kind of part of that. It was going to be a 35-week a year, $1 million a week minimum tour, and it was going to be a tour that would offer a livelihood for every second-tier Australian or above who was sick of travelling, sick of living away from home, sick of living overseas. You could base yourself in Australia. There were going to be 10 tournaments played on the Australian mainland or Tasmania, and the other 25 tournaments. I'm sort of fudging the numbers here a bit, but the other 25 tournaments a year would be played no further away than a 6 or 7 hour flight. So that was the pitch, and it was going to be awesome. So that was going to be my life. Like, I was going to be a part of that team. We were so excited. And then, Chilahan and the Asian tour, pretty strong tour, sort of realised, hang on, this is starting to go somewhere here, this thing, so we better kill it. So they just used their influence and they killed it. So that was the end of that.
I think back to that time, and I remember it, sort of coming back into golf and, getting really interested in the professional level game. And I remember that happening and just thinking that was absolute tragedy for all of those young guys in Australia. Some of them I knew through growing up in golf and knowing that they were out there wanting to do that. And, it was absolutely tragedy. Australian Open, covering those for Golf Australia. What are some of the standout moments that you've had, sitting down there at the Lakes or the Australian, and whatever one of the ones that you've covered? What do you remember there?
I remember a Saturday. I've become a bit invested in Lucas Herbert. So we've had dramatic finishes, and we've followed Jordan Spieth, and we've had Jason Day, and we've had Adam Scott winning the day Adam Scott won, the tournament Adam Scott won at New South Wales, which was a hellish event. You're looking at me like, I think it was New South Wales.
No, I'm trying to remember exactly how far back that was.
It was that tournament where it was weather affected at the start, and there were players hitting off at about, I remember Cam Percy hit off at about 10 past 7 on the Thursday evening, and you just got to play some holes. Get some holes played before it's too dark, come back the next day, and they had really bad weather. Appleby shot, again, 65, 66. You got the bad end of the weather on the Thursday and the Friday, and shot 65, 66. It was unbelievable golf. And then Scotty ran him down over the weekend. And I remember it was the first big breakthrough for Adam Scott in Australia. And, God, I hope I've got my clubs right here. My brains, I'm pretty sure it was New South Wales. Anyway, Scotty won, and I remember I interviewed him as he walked off the 18th green up to the scorer's hut, the crush of people, everyone patting him on the back. And I got 2 or 3 questions with him on the way up to and he was just the smile, that $1 million Adam Scott smile was just to be close to somebody like him for whom that was a really important day. So important that I'm doubting I've got the right club.
No, I think you're right.
I'm right,
but it's a good few years ago now.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So it was his first real breakthrough in Australia.
Yeah.
And you could see the relief. You could see it was just coming out of him. I remember one day we're at the Lakes when John Daly emptied his bag, hit the 11 on 11, 10 or 11. 11, yeah, 10's the 11 around the lake. He kept going for it and dropped. It was tin cup. Give me another one. And he was never going to make it. And he DQ'd. And that was pretty poor form.
It has to be one of the most insane acts on a golf course that in any professional level at any tour of all time.
Yep. And paid big money to come out here. Yeah. Clearly he wasn't in a great headspace, but, everyone had been telling those involved in bringing him out here that he, and I remember that day, getting back to that sort of controlling the narrative, I remember that day I was out on the course and I jumped over from 10 and because I could see Daly hit 1 or 2 in the water. So I jumped over and he'd hit his 3rd ball in the water, then his 4th. And I've said, you've got to come down to me. I've got the camera over. So we're right behind Daly on the fairway, right there. And he's hitting these, trying to draw them and power fades in. And he was never going to. And I remember I was saying, you've got to come to me. Daly's about to disqualify here. He's running out of balls. And they refused to put it on. They thought it would bring the tournament. It'd be a bad look. Those who made the call, it'd be a bad look. He didn't deserve. We didn't want him, disrespecting our tournament like that. And so they refused to put it on. And I was so insignificant compared to some of the people who were heading up that coverage. But, I had to say something at the end of the day. I thought that was an incredibly bad call. But
goes to your point about, we talked before about the PGA Tour and just letting it happen and letting people see what happens. Back to that point for a sec, they're very guarded. And I was having a chat with someone the other day and, you love your motorsport as well, Formula One, and just the focus that's gone towards Formula One on the back of that Netflix documentary that every man and their dog seems to have watched. Now, my son, who's 21, but he watched that 3 years ago, and he is now the savant on Formula One. Yeah. He hated Formula One. When I was working for Mercedes-Benz and having to go and give up weekends and go to these things, which wasn't a problem, by the way, he didn't have an interest in that. But now he knows about it, and it just seems that they've, I guess, humanised the people who do these unbelievable things a little bit more. And maybe golf could take a little bit out of that. Yeah,
absolutely. No doubt. I mean, I think it helps when you've got generational talent who are prepared to be that person for the consumer, and they are easy to listen to and we need some. I mean, Tiger could have been that, but he was bedeviled by so many of these errors of his own making that in the other part of the Tiger story became as compelling as what he was doing on the golf course.
Talk about a friend of the podcast and someone who I've recently had a game of golf with, who the listeners will know because I Skyted about it, Lucas Herbert.
Yep.
And he's got the potential to be that sort of raw, engaging, just says what he wants, shoots from the hip, sort of has a bit of fun and doesn't really give two hoots too much about it. So more of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I love him. I think he's great. He's potentially, and I know he won't mind me saying there's probably a rough edge or two, but I love, he knows that I'm a fanboy like you, and I reckon he's great for the game, and I know he's had his issue, but that's okay. He'll learn from all of the things that he's, been through already in the game, and he's been through a lot, good and, a little bit of bad. I think he's a great, media talent, and if he can be what some of us are barracking and hoping for him to be, then he could be great. Absolutely could.
Well, his stocks are trending in the right direction in a golf sense, before Christmas I had a game of golf with him at PK and he's rocked up with these old sticks. I don't know if you guys got the chance to speak to him about it, but he's got these old Walter Hagen blades. They were older than me at least. They were early 70s and some old persimmon wood and this old bag. He turns up straight to the tee, no warm-up, and just maybe not the first hole. He doubled the first south at PK, but he had shot 5 under that day.
Wow. With that equipment.
Playing with these old things. And for me, that was just a massive eye-opener about what the ball does.
Yep.
And you talked about it last week on Inside the Ropes with Clates at length, who, you've had the privilege and pleasure of Clates' company many, 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 many times. And, every time I see Clates on the podcast, I always listen to it. And now that you've got him to be able to work out where the microphone is and you've got to talk into it to hear it. Early days, you're always like, Clates, microphone, mate. But, the discussion that you had with him last week about the rollback, just for those that don't listen or haven't listened to it, you should go and listen to it. But let's just cover off that topic because for me, that match with Lucas, watching him pound these clubs that I used to play with as a kid and hit the ball 340 metres with old technology, I thought, wow, there's something, I get it. I finally got it. The penny dropped.
So there's two parts to this. One is the protection of the time-honoured facilities and the capacity for these guys to make the game outgrow itself in terms of distance, and then we have to build the debate. Everyone's heard the debate now, so there's that part. It's the threat to the great traditional golf courses and every club in the bag. That's the threat. Do we want the best players in the world showing that they can hit 3 irons off the deck into par 4s? Do we want to see that? So these are the questions. I have to do it, so it'd be nice to see them do it, albeit they hit it 40, 50, 60 metres further than I do, but I'd still like to see them do it. Well, you never see them do it. They never hit anything more than an 8 iron into a par 4 ever, these blokes. So there's all of that, which is a really worthwhile conversation, and one that the R&A and the USGA clearly agree now based on the review and the recommendations. Enough's enough. We can't let it go any further. The other part of it, though, is what do people want to see? You and I who pay for our streaming service or our pay TV subscription, who go to a tournament, what do we want to see? I don't necessarily want to see the next wave of, I don't want to see what the next version of Bryson DeChambeau looks like. I don't want to see that. But some people might. Some people want to see a robot, a flesh and bone robot who it's all about clubhead speed, getting all the things matching up with the technology that allows somebody to just carry the ball, pick a number, 400 yards, whatever the number is. Maybe that's what people want to see. And if they do, then who's to say that we shouldn't allow them to do it? So they're the two arguments, or the sort of polar, and then in between there's a bunch of other stuff you can lay in. But I'm in the former camp, I'm in the Clayton camp on this one.
What's Clayton's thoughts on when will they get to the potential for bifurcating the golf ball?
So he was saying that by 2024 at the Open Championship, I think he said, well, I stand to be corrected, but 2024 Open Championship, they'll be playing a bifurcated ball. So that's what he envisages will be the timeline between where we are now and how long it'll take us to get there.
I go back to Formula One, and there's a sport when they need to change the product to make it safer for the manufacturers who pay the money. When they need to get more eyeballs on there, and they need to make the product better by closer racing, have more people in the mix, they change the rules. They do things to make their product as best as it possibly can be, safe on the racetracks. Their golf course is a racetrack. Okay, they're going too fast for that course. We need to change it. That's one of the biggest, most financially, astute organisations in the world. Maybe not, but you know what I mean.
I do.
And I can't see why, if if there's anyone, I'm talking to real life golfers all day, every day. I'm selling them their Pro V1s and their Callaway Chrome Softs and all of that sorts of things. And the conversation isn't around that in the small percentage of the time around how far will it go. They just want to know what's going to be the best one for them relative to how they play the game now. And they don't care if it's the same ball as what Tiger uses or whatever else, because they just want to get their ball around Morak, Peninsula Kingswood, Barwon Heads or wherever it is in the least amount of strokes and which one goes best for them. That's it. Well,
as Clates often says, it's the don't take my guns, don't take my 45 yards. Don't take it off me. It's mine. It's the part of my constitutional right to have it, particularly in America. Don't take it off me. Well, maybe for the good of the game, we do need to wind it back, because golf courses can't continue to grow at the they can't the game can't afford it. It's unsustainable. So,
they won't. Mr. Titleist will sell as many golf balls as he can because you keep losing them. I keep losing them. My joke, hey, how you going, Ross? I said, you keep losing them, I keep selling them. That's pretty simple mathematics.
When was the last time Rory paid for a golf ball?
Exactly. But the point that Clates makes, which I don't think, unless you're as old as me and as old as us, the change of the ball, the small ball to the big ball, when they went to the big ball in the States, they lost distance. And why did they change to a big ball? Because it wasn't sitting on the grass properly. They've done it before.
Yep. Oh, no, the game's forever been changing, but it's been this is the first time in this playing cohort's lifetime that something is being – well, no, it's not the first time that something's been taken away, because we've moderated the face of drivers and, there have been regulations that have seen, certain groove faces outlawed. And, so changes have been, as you very well know, you know more about this stuff than I do, but changes have been made to legislate out of the game several things that have made the performance of the equipment, better. So, and in the eyes of some, unfairly better. So, it's not unprecedented. It just seems to have been a really big deal. And, we're obsessed with yardage. We watch, the ball tracer and, we've all played, simulators and, we all get obsessed with, look how far that went,
I want to see a ball that curves like an old Bellata ball. It spins back on the green like an old Bellata ball. I'd probably think about, if it was me, giving the pros a choice of two balls, like the Formula One teams get a choice of tyres and they can choose their strategy, but they both go sort of similar distance, but one spins more and one spins less.
Yep.
And depending on the players, they can choose, and they're going to get a benefit either way.
Fantastic. And and that would be, I think they would live with that. So we've still got, the capacity to choose, we're not all playing the same ball. Okay, well, this is good. And wouldn't it be great if we could see the ability to watch players shape golf balls again? I mean, they can and they do, obviously, but not the way they used to. Well, that just doesn't happen like it used to.
Well, they don't need to, but the ball's not designed to have a big ropey draw all the time. So but anyway, So we talked about, I think maybe off air, but we talked about how, inside the ropes and you influenced part of my podcast journey. And I remember the call. I was sitting in the workshop. I was probably changing some grips on someone's clubs, and the call came through. It was you. It was a nice surprise. And you said, I'm doing this podcast with Golf Australia, and we might want to talk about some product. Well, that part never happened, but, it was then when I started thinking about this. And you know what, the other and you'll laugh at this because, you and I are Blues fans. The other person that influenced that podcasting journey for My Love of Golf was Dylan Buckley.
Right. How?
Well, I helped.
Because of his podcast?
Well, it was before he started that, but he put this little picture up on his Instagram. And I knew Dylan a little bit because of the guys that come and I helped them with their golf clubs. And he put this little device on his Instagram. He said, see this? I'm going to start making some audio stuff with this thing. It was a little Zoom H5 recorder. Hey, Dylan, what's that thing? He said, that's what a recorder, and I'm going to start making a podcast. And it's like, If Dylan can make a podcast, so can I.
Yeah.
One of us has kicked on, and one of us still flogging golf balls.
But what a joy for you, I imagine. I can tell because you're still doing it, and you're doing it you're into the hundreds now of these shows that you've been doing. So what a joy to be able to access people, just people who share your love of the game, and just have a chat to them. It's great.
I'm not short of a chat. Now, we talked about Golf Australia just there briefly, the Inside the Ropes podcast. It's, 109, nearly 200 episodes?
Nearly 200, yeah. We're up to 195 or 6 this week. Yeah.
What's it like being part of that crew? You've spoken to some unbelievable people from the professional level, from the administrative level, all around the world. It must give you a lot of joy to sit down and press the button. My joke is I just press the buttons here and let the people talk. It must give you a lot of pleasure to press the buttons and have a few chats with those guys.
Yeah, look, it's Mark. Most people who listen to your show probably know the name Mark Hayes, golf writer, turned into the media manager for Golf Australia, and it's really Hazy's baby, and he has an incredible passion for the game. And he brings us together. And to be able to, like you said before, about Mike Clayton, he's not the only one, but to be able to sit there with him and ask novice questions to somebody who has as deep and encyclopedic and intricate knowledge of the game as anybody, I think, on planet Earth. I defy anyone to match Clayton for the breadth of his knowledge and wisdom around the game. Well, he's not, again, Clayton isn't everyone's cup of tea. You mentioned Clayton designs to a room full of 50 golf people, and 25 of them will say the bloke's a genius, and 25 will say he ruined my club. I mean, or maybe not 25. It might be a bit more favourable than that, but you get my point. Yeah. He is an antagonist and he's a man of his own opinion. But to sit there and listen to him find information and anecdote, and it's just amazing. And then you see, because of, social media and the World Wide Web, you get a sense for how highly considered he is by the global golfing community, whether they be ex-players or media, whoever it might be. So we're blessed, and we get access to, by virtue of Hazy's connection, we get access to, Australian golfers all over the world, and we're in such good hands. There are so many good. We've had this lovely little group of top level international pros, in the last 20 years, spearheaded by, Adam Scott and Jason Day, probably in particular. But now the next level under, it's deeper. Hopefully it's as good. We've already seen Hannah and Minji, and now we need a couple of the boys to, start to get to the level that they're at. But we're very lucky on that show to be able to touch base with, the front, kind of the spearheads of Australian golf, and I sit back and just go along for the ride. I love it. It's great.
No, I absolutely love tuning in. Now, the thing back to Clates and also the young crop of future Australian golf stars, the thing that I admire Clates for a lot is his ability to, despite his experience and his age, and most people would be running away from the young ones. He comes towards them. He's caddying for the young ones. He's putting on the events and getting all these young amateurs through last year's COVID period to get them down to the St Andrews Beach. And
how good was that?
And he's coming towards them. And when you see someone like him wanting to pass on that level of knowledge, insight, and experience, it's very, very impressive. And he's on the architecture front. I'm not an architect. I like a bit of built architecture, and that was the thing that got me into golf architecture. But one thing I learned about the built form is not everyone likes every building that's ever designed or built. But if I said to you about Federation Square, and I just moved to Melbourne when they were putting Federation Square up, and coming down from Sydney where we had the Opera House and all of the other stuff that had been up for years and whatever, there was a big outroar with Federation Square. People hated it. Yeah, it was very polarising. Would you take it away today?
I wouldn't. No.
No one in Melbourne would.
No.
And, and I remember, before I had any interest in golf architecture. But I remember, I never got to play at the lakes in the Australian as a kid, but I drove that freeway up and down, through Sydney from the Hunter Valley down to wherever I was going to work. And the lakes is on one side and the Australian's on the other side. I could never see the Australian, but you could see the lakes.
Mm.
And when they did that redo, which Mike did, and they put all those sandy wastelands in, and I was sort of loosely involved in golf at the time playing, and people were like, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. You wouldn't have it any other way now. He was ahead of his time.
So I agree. Some people would have it some other way.
Mm-hmm.
What he does when he does a restoration or a renovation, on a course that's existing like the lakes, to use it as an example, was the first thing he does is go back and have a look at the original drawings and the original karting of the course and the original routing and the original vegetation plans and the original everything. Anything he can get his hands on that tells you what the golf course was intended to be, he goes back and finds it. And seemingly it makes sense. And if it makes sense, as it was proposed 80 or 90 years ago, let's get it back to that. Decades and generations of board members have come in and said, oh, no, we should stick some trees there and plant some shrubs there and put a garden bed over here and let's it looks a bit brown and a bit sparse. And, well, it actually looks Australian. That's what Australia looks like in summer. Let's not fill it full of stuff that shouldn't be there. Nature never intended it to be there. It grows like weeds. I haven't been back to Commonwealth. I don't think they've finished what they started out doing at Commonwealth, but I remember going back there for a trade day or a pro-am or something or other years after I'd been a member there, and seeing through lines across fairways that I'd never seen when I was a member.
Yep.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's nice. Oh, and it was all about getting rid of stuff that shouldn't have been there in the first and wasn't there in the first place. And I'm not sure it ever got finished. I apologise to Commonwealth members if I haven't got all the full story there, but that's what he does, and he's and I love it. I know 1% of what Mike Clayton's talking about when he's talking about it, but the 1% I get, I go, yeah, no, that's exactly the way it should be. I think he's a national treasure. I really do. You should get him on your show. You'd love it. You'd have him on for 4 hours. You'd never stop talking to him. You'd love to get him on.
We've met just once, and he seemed to know who I was, and obviously I know who he was. So that was quite a nice little acknowledgement that we knew each other. But I would, and I actually get a little bit. I don't know what the right way to. You're going to say wake up to yourself. But I get a little bit shy in asking people like Mike to come and talk to me on this type of info. I just end up pushing away, going, "Oh, why would he want to talk to me?" And maybe that sounds a bit silly, but it doesn't.
No. It's easy to be intimidated by people like him. If that's that happens. I reckon it happens to me. But when you suspect that you might be exposed a bit, but he doesn't care. If you've got a genuine interest in the game and you're prepared and you're happy to listen, and he doesn't care if you take him on, he welcomes that.
Yeah.
That's all he cares about. And I think that's all people. Are you wasting my time? Are you wasting my time because you're just doing it to tick a box and fill half an hour, or do you really care? And if you really care, then they'll sniff that. The Mike Claytons and they'll sniff that out pretty quickly, and they're happy to talk to you.
Well, I will do that and talk to Mike. And Mike, if you get the chance to listen to this, thank you in advance for saying yes. But I just get the fact that they've been on every other golf podcast and they're doing it all the time. And Mike's on, he's been on anyway. There's several.
Shackelford has him. But I think that's. I love his website. I think you should be. I don't read it every week, but I think Shackelford's. If you've got an appetite to consume, then I would make his website must go to once a week.
Yeah.
Just go and see how he's handling, and I think he's one of those. It's worth spending some time with as well.
Now back to the young golfers and the next crop. Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of ones to look out for there: Minjee, Hannah. Who on the boys? You got Lucas, you've got Min Woo. Who else? What about?
If there's one, and again, I'm going to sound like a bit of a Clayton acolyte here, but I've seen enough with my own eyes of Elvis Smiley to think that he might be pretty special. I think he is made of, not only has he got a beautiful Langwood golf swing to my eye, not being a swing technician whatsoever, but I like the way he plays golf. But I think he's made of the right competitive stuff. I think he's, comes from pretty good competitive stock, obviously. And, he's just got the right amount of, the stuff you need, So I think I'd be watching him.
Now, mate, just to finish up, I've got a couple of questions here from Rocket. I think we've covered off how you find time to cover all the sports. You've talked about that.
Poor bugger today too. He was stiff. He had a little wager on Nate Lashley. We're talking the Monday night after the final round at Pebble Beach today, and that was hard to watch. That was really hard to watch. Might have been harder for Rocket, I think.
Well, he shelled out on Brooks Koepka last week and did pretty well on Brooks.
Okay.
You don't win them all, Rocket, but it was looking like a fairly solid tip there for a good while. He's asked a personal question from me: how awesome is Bob Murphy, and does Bob wear his wool-lined denim jacket much?
He does in winter. He wears it all the time. He never takes it off, and he's very awesome. He's one of the world's good blokes. He's just developed a taste for the game.
Beautiful.
So I think we've got one. We've got another one.
Bring him in.
Yeah.
No, well, Bob is your partner on, what are you, 3 o'clock on? Drive on SEN, Melbourne's fine sports-only radio station.
Thank you.
Favourite Big Bash special commentators?
Ricky's the king. He's – this is going to – it's a catch-all. I like everybody I've ever worked with. I enjoy the company of. I'm not saying this to be overly woke, but I do love Lisa Stalaker, and I wish Mel Jones was exclusive with us and not splitting her time between Fox and Seven. But I was lucky enough to work with them for a long time up at Channel 10 before they lost the rights, and two finer human beings you will not meet.
Okay. What else have we got here from Rocket? How is spending, and this is where I guess first enjoyed listening to yourself. How was spending 10 years alongside the Wisp?
Well, it was fantastic, and I love him like an older brother, and it was actually quite something to see. We stuck together through a couple of different versions of when I was doing Brekkie Radio, and to see the impact that the Essendon, supplements scandal saga had on him as we're on air when that was going, when that was breaking and evolving, and his son was in the middle of it. And in the end, it claimed him. He couldn't do it anymore. He had to get away from the Monday to Friday unending news barrage. And I really felt for him. It was a tough, in his time in footy, the two tough experiences he's had have been, coaching St Kilda, which didn't go the way he wanted it to, and enduring what his son went through, which was deeply personal and obviously, and quite affecting for him, I think. So I was covering the game when he was a coach, and I was alongside him when he was going through the other bit, and I really like him. He's a complex individual, like a lot of those superstars from that sport can be, but I think he's got a good heart, Tim. I like him a lot. Yeah.
Now, of course, for anyone listening outside of Victoria or the
can't play golf.
AFL,
you can't play golf. Bat and ball sport's hopeless.
Bring him in. We can fix him.
It'd be a waste of your time.
Fair enough. But we are talking about Tim Watson, Bombers legend,
yep,
and his son Job Watson, who played for the Bombers, also a Bombers legend. So that's
I should have mentioned that. Sorry.
No. But you guys owned Breakfast Radio in Melbourne for a long time, and to get everyone listening, and who else was there? Was it who
Billy was there to start with. Yep. Brownless was there to begin with, and then he disappeared. He went to, I don't know whether he went to Triple M or somewhere, and then it was Tim and I pretty well on our own there for a while thereafter. So it started, Gary, Tim, and Billy and Line, and Gazza had enough, and I took over from him. So yeah.
Now, Rocket's asked another question here. I've got it here on the phone. Your advice to aspiring media podcasters and people wanting to dive into the world of content creation.
Wow,
I think Rocket's backing himself in on this one as well.
Righto. Well, I look forward to hearing what he's got to offer. It's a good question. I mean, it's gone from nothing. It's gone from zero. I'll use your F1 part. It's gone from 0 to 100 in very little time. The land of the podcast. There's so much out there now that I think if you're going to do something, I was going to say find a point of difference, but it's very difficult to do that now. Just follow your heart. Like if you love something and you want it and you have a need to talk about it, I just got to talk about this, and got to find someone to talk with or to about it. Podcasts are great. I mean, you can get that out of your system and you can put it down there, and who knows, there might be a million other people out there that are wanting to talk about exactly the same thing. You just didn't even know they were out there.
And if you like the My Love of Golf, you got 6. It doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter.
Exactly right.
Front bar, most memorable guest on the front bar?
We had a night. Alan Jakovich is probably the most memorable, because he was a recluse and he's got an unbelievable backstory. He was a meteor as a footballer, and he is a passionate Serbian, and he went back and fought in the Balkans war when his family were on the front line. Their properties were being, threatened of being destroyed. So he went back and took up arms and fought. He came back to Australia, and it was an incredible story. And he became a bit of a recluse. So we got him on, and it was great fun. Like hunting him down and getting him on was hunting him down in the non-Balkan Wars type, context. Was great. We did have a night when we had Lee Matthews and Malcolm Blight on the same show. And the show was, I think the show was pretty good. But then we went up to the Channel 7 boardroom after the show, which is where we have our post-show debrief. Show finishes at about 10:30. It was at about 2:45 that morning when somebody said, listen, maybe it's time we should get going. Blighty would tell a story, Lee would top it. Blighty would top Lee's story, Lee would go, I got that covered. It was just these, and we just couldn't ask enough questions. And if any of us could remember any of it, it would make a fantastic book. None of us can. But it was just a night where you were blessed to be in the room in footy, Australian rules, to be in the room of two giants of the game. We were very lucky that night. It was great.
Yeah, well, it's phenomenal seeing the rise of I guess you're going to say it probably just started as a little project, see how we go, and and now the number one footy show. It's the only footy show, and loved by the Melbourne population, the Australian population. It looks like a lot of fun for you to sit there with a schooner of beer in front of you every Thursday night during the footy season and the other events that you cover, and have some fun with it. It's congrats.
Thanks.
Rocket's got one last question. I think this is a bit of have you ever tried to putt one-handed?
Is he saying that I should?
No.
Is he recommending that I try that? Bad is my putting, is it?
No, I think he might be referencing a round that you and he may have had with a member at PK who I think left you both bemused at his one-handed putting.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Oh, yeah. No names. We won't go into that right now. No. But, yeah, that was yes. Look, golf clubs are made up of, many and varied characters. And it's good to meet them all.
That's what makes it an enjoyable place. All golf clubs to turn up. Yeah, Mornington Golf Club is a special one. That was my reintroduction, and we should go and have a game at Mornington.
How's the little par 3 better down? The one that you hit out onto the is it everything it looked like it was going to be?
Yeah, it's a hole in one magnet, just like our 17th at PK, and the members love it because every week someone's having a hole in one. But it's just a phenomenal vista looking back across to the city. green on the edge of the water there on the cliff overlooking Mount Eliza. It's really, really good. And we should go and have a game and meet some of the members down there because they are salt of the earth blokes like...
No, love to. We played a Blue Jacket Classic down there not long ago. We had our final round there, I think. So we got to know a few of the members very, very well.
Blue Jacket Classic usually happens at Port Fairy, is that right?
No, it's all over the place. We've taken it. It's been all over it's been international. It got played at St Andrews one year. Been going since 1987. It's happening, well, touch wood, it's happening this coming weekend up at Murray Downs. It's the legend continues.
Favourite place you've played around the world?
Oh, this is going to sound horrifically provincial, but if I could play, if I had to play one, you played far more courses than I have. But if I could play one course, if I had to play one course for the rest of my life, I think I'd play St Andrews Beach. I just think I love everything about that golf course, except for the walk back to the sheds off the back of 18. I think it's a pretty special place. Yeah.
No, you're 100% correct, and I agree. And, it's just the fact that I think sometimes for me I get a bit jaded by the fact that it is only 25 minutes down the road and it's so easy and just pay you 50, 80, $100 or whatever it is and it's cheap at that, whatever it is.
Yep.
But, you go there with never seen it before and, it sits right up there alongside some of the great courses that I've played in Ireland and Scotland and, that's about it. But,
Yep.
Yeah, sensational. And how is your own golf going at the moment?
Well, I'm not playing nearly as much as I should, although the last time I played, I had 41 points down at St Andrews Beach.
Oh, really?
So played really well and off 15. So I just want to play. Like I can't get into the routine of playing at the moment. So I'm in one of those horrific phases of my life where it's when I say horrific, I say that, in inverted commas, but I just can't get a game of golf into my weekly routine. I'll try. I'm going to try and get an early game, make a really hardcore attempt to make it Wednesday morning, first group off at Peninsula, Kingswood. That's what I'm going to have to try and do. But so I don't really know. But the last time I played great. So
can you do Thursdays?
A bit harder when footy season starts. Makes it a long day.
Yeah.
You're hitting off early and then finishing late on the Thursday night. So, so that's the hard part. Finding a day when there's nothing after work. Finish at 6 on radio. So you just want to, you start to run out of petrol if you've got up early, played golf, then front up and do the work. So you just got to find Wednesdays could be okay, I reckon. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. Yeah.
Well, I know you've probably seen him around the club, but it'll warm your heart to know that Sam Doherty's back on the golf track and
great.
He's looking sensational. His lower half of his body is just a thing of beauty.
I'm that's open-ended possibilities there, but I know exactly what you mean.
Well, the quads, the calves,
the knees,
the calf quando.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, and but I think in relation to his health scare that he had at the last year, end of last year, I think everything is
great.
Looking good there.
But as you very well know, he's a first-class individual, that fella. So we wish nothing but good things happening to him.
Last thing on golf and blues. We've got to get young Jess out there more often on the golf course. I think she's a talent waiting to take on golf, young Jess Hosking.
So she's just become a member. She's in the
In that,
and she outdrove her old man the other day.
Fantastic.
So I hope Mark's listening, and I hope she's telling the truth. She outdrove him on, I can't remember what hole she said, but she hit it about 240, she reckons. So she's probably outdriven me as well, if that's the case. But she's a magnificent human being. So we will get her out on the golf course more often.
You must give your young daughters, 3 of them, a lot of pleasure watching you run out there in the purple, carrying the drinks and the magic sprays for the Blues ladies.
They do love it. They're little footballers already themselves. So to see the way they access the game through the AFLW, the way that I accessed it through the VFL. Back in the day, it's exactly the same. And it's not forced parenting. It's just natural. So this is what young girls have got in front of them now that they didn't have when their mum was a young girl, which is a great thing. So I'm very happy that it's there.
Well, you got in with the girls and sung the Mighty Blues song with passion on the weekend.
Yep.
It's embarrassing. Copped a bit for it.
Well, was it last year or the year before? I've created a tradition that's I'm the only one aware of the fact that it's a tradition, but 2 years ago we had a sluggish start to the season and we won a game and we got back in the rooms and it was almost like the girls didn't quite know what to do. So I said, why don't get around and arms around one another, and I was pumped. And so we sung the song and I led. So now in the back of my mind, the first win of every season, I will lead the song. And that was our first win. I will never do it again for the rest of this season. But that's my tradition that I've bestowed upon myself and I'm aware of, but I'm sure no one else has got any idea that it exists.
It looks like you have a ball out there doing what you do and helping the club and hanging around with the girls and Jess Hosking. And let's get you down to the golf club and let's get you in and get you some up and running, because I want to see you beat some of the boys.
You'll never get rid of the – if you invite her into your shop, you will never get rid of her.
No, Jess and I, we catch up down there. She comes down and she tinkers around the golf clubs quite a lot, and she'll hit me up for some information about what she should get her old man for a present, that sort of thing. So,
fantastic.
But we've been talking about getting out there on the golf course, and I think we talked about getting out there with yourself. But
let's do it. Let's make sure we do it. Let's hold each other accountable for that. To that.
Very good, mate. I've kept you long enough. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks, Emma, for letting you go, probably at the time when the kids should be getting off to bed and doing all that sort of stuff.
No, they're all right. Good.
Thank you, mate. And
mate, thanks for the chat. It's fun. Hopefully I've enjoyed it. So hopefully that's all that really matters. But hopefully anybody who's prepared to listen does too. So
just two blokes having a chat about sport and golf.
Yep. Perfect, Roscoe.
Very good, mate. I'll see you next time. Okay.
Yeah,
bye.